from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Friday night edition of the program. We're live, we're national, and I'm keeping you company straight till 1 a.m. If you want to join us on our late night national town hall conversation, or you're listening where it's not late night yet, that's okay. You can still give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. The news of the Trump rally still making its way through the media cycle. I didn't think that they would give him that much of a bang for his buck, so to speak. But they continue to talk about El Trompito Donaldus Magnus, the 45th president of these United States. I'm going to dig into that a little bit later. But right now, I would like to get into a little bit of what's going on in the border. Because, you know, that continues to be a thing. And I'll share a story with you. I had lunch with my lawyer today, and it's always an interesting conversation. She is an old high school friend of mine, and got into this debate over crime and immigration. And this is someone I respect, someone that is very educated, and someone I trust. And I've always known we've disagreed on politics and we see the world through different lenses. But I really found it interesting because, you know, she's done a lot of work in corporate stuff, but she's also done defending those who've been trafficked and sexual abuse and things like that. And I thought for sure that she would be against all of these crimes against women that are being committed by illegal aliens. And she was really bothered by my use of the term illegal alien. She said they're undocumented, and the majority of them are seeking asylum. And I said, yeah, but, you know, they don't qualify to seek asylum. And, you know, if you're in, I don't know, Pakistan, and you're seeking asylum, you should seek asylum in a country closer to Pakistan, right? If you're being persecuted in Pakistan, find the first country that's not Pakistan, that's not persecuting you, and go there. Doesn't mean that because you're persecuted in Pakistan, you have to end up in the United States or Turkey or anywhere else. And her issue was that that's not for me to decide. That's for them to decide because they're the ones that are persecuted. And that as the persecuted person, it's up to them to determine where they feel safe. And I was saying, but that's not what the law says. And she, you know, we got into a whole debate on the law. And, you know, of course, she was like, and how long have you practiced immigration law? Because I started my career in immigration law, right? And so we get into this whole thing. And it was, you know, a very fun conversation, honestly. But it really opened my eyes to realize that there are so many people that, despite anything, are just really viewing the world through that one lens. And I guess I'm the same way, right? My opinions are unlikely to change. Very unlikely. And so are hers. And, you know, she was saying, you know, in the work that she's done as an attorney on domestic violence and sexual assault, that the number one offender has always been men. And if you break it down even further, white men, followed by black men, then Hispanic men. And she said, so when you're talking about people coming from other countries, she said, this is a very small figure. Not that it doesn't matter, but it's not the elephant in the room. And it made me think that perhaps I was framing my argument the wrong way because I was making the case that, you know, something like what happened to Laken Riley should never happen because we shouldn't have an open border. But in her world, the border should definitely be open. And irrespective of the border being open or closed, you're always going to have people that rape people and hurt people and kill people, whether they're from South America or from down the block. And I understood her point, but I felt like we were talking about apples and oranges. So it went back and forth, and eventually she got very, very upset with me and was like, I don't want to have this conversation anymore because, I'm going to get, she said, I feel like you're being dismissive and offensive. And I said, all right, I will cease and desist. And that's, very typical, I think, of what happens when you get into these debates where you can't continue to push the issue. But it was very eye-opening to think that, people that care deeply about women, people that care deeply about their work, care deeply about the law, love their family, love their country, can see things so differently than I do, or perhaps than you do. And as long as we have those differences, we can still coexist. But there has to be clarity on what's right and what's wrong. There has to be clarity on the law. And when we're talking about what's happening at the border, there's but so much you can do, right? If you see the open border as the right, legal, and just thing to do, then, my goodness, we the people need to do a way better job at making sure that people with that kind of view aren't in charge of border policy. Because otherwise, we're going to have people selling all of their belongings in poor countries like Turkey or anywhere else. And they're going to come to the United States for the American dream. The problem is, if you allow everyone to come to America for the American dream, there may be no American dream left for those that are already here. And that was the point I was making, but one that she refused to acknowledge or even accept. But before I take a break, I want you to hear this report from Bill Melugin, again, Fox News Channel, does a really good job. And he's having a conversation with migrants that are crossing the border. And listen to this very eye-opening conversation.
We talked to one Turkish man who told us he essentially sold everything he had to be able to come here to the United States and cross the border. He told us he was shocked at how easy it was, how there was no resistance when he crossed over. And he said that Americans should be worried that it was so easy, and they should also worry about the kind of people crossing the border. Take a listen. Did you have to pay a cartel?
Yes.
How much?
Around 10,000.
10,000?
Yes. In fact, the American people is right, completely true. Who come into this country, they don't know. Well, okay, I'm good, but how if they're not good? How they killer, psychopath else? No guarantee of that. Why? Like no security, no security check, no background check.
No security check, no background check. You're worrying about who's crossing the border?
Yes. Of course, me, because I'm like, people are not look normal.
So there you go. You have an actual illegal immigrant that's telling you that the American people are right, that we have a right to be concerned because we don't know. And he says, yeah, I'm good, but we don't know if they're good. How do we know if they're not killers? How do we know if they're not psychopaths or anything else? No guarantee of that. Like no security. I'm reading the transcript. No security check. No background check. Yes, of course, because people are not normal. This is a guy that paid $10,000 to sneak into this country. He agrees with me. But yet I can't get some of my close friends to do that. And listen, it's not about agreeing with me or not. It really isn't. My friendship is not based on your agreement with my politics. But I just find it interesting how people from other countries admit this, full-throated admission. Whereas, so many people in America are just caught up with, in my opinion, Marxist propaganda. It's really what it is. Marxist propaganda that they likely learned in school or in law school that really keeps their eye off the ball. But who am I to say such a thing? All right, we're going to continue that conversation with the immigration discussion and a little bit more straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations. I had somebody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right?
That's
but
right.
You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue our conversation. And part of what I want to discuss right now is the continuation of my story with my lawyer, who's a fellow Hispanic like me. And she didn't like my opinions on immigration. And someone else that doesn't like my opinion on immigration is Ana Navarro. You remember her from The View, right? Hanging out with Joy Behar and Whoopi Goldberg and that crew. And she was on CNN yesterday, and listen to what she has to say about people like me that are upset with illegal immigration.
And then the third thing, Jim, and this is the truth, and you and I know this, as Latinos, there are some Latino immigrants who forget they came here as immigrants and who want to shut the door behind them, and who think being anti-immigrant somehow is going to make them pass as more American, pass as whatever. And that's a very stupid attitude to have, because what folks don't realize is that when the guy drives thousands of miles to go hunt down Latinos in a Walmart in Texas, he doesn't care when you came here. He doesn't care what your accent is. What he's looking for is, does it look like me? Does it sound like me? That's what he's looking for.
Now, this is likely a true statement, right? I'm very sure that if the guy was in Walmart shooting up Latinos and he saw me, he'd probably shoot me. That still has nothing to do with illegal immigration. Now, you're going to say, well, if we didn't have illegal immigration, the guy wouldn't be shooting. I doubt that. Psycho people are psycho people. The issue here is that there's a right way and a wrong way. And laws change and things change, right? So back in the days with the public charge rules, people had to come and prove they had a sponsor, and they had to lay out money and say, look, we're not going to go on welfare. We're not going to be on the public dole. All those things were things that had to be done. But they weren't always done. Or I should say they're not always done now. And I think this is the big problem we have and why we have immigration that's run amok. Now, I want to continue our discussion on immigration just a tad, and I want to do it with someone who's familiar to the program. He's been here before, and we love having him back. Dennis Kneale is the former managing editor of Forbes magazine, and you've seen him on CNBC. He's a television superstar. I see him on Newsmax all the time. And he's the host of What's Bugging Me. It's a podcast on the Ricochet Network, and he's our guest. Dennis Kneale, welcome back.
Hello, Rich, and happy holiday weekend. Grill, baby, grill.
Grill, baby, grill. Yeah, God bless America. So, Dennis Kneale, you've been listening to this audio from Ana Navarro saying that Hispanics who are against illegal immigration have a stupid attitude. What's your thought on the current state of affairs with illegal immigration in our country?
Well, you know, I can understand why immigrants who came here legally, who waited through the long and difficult process, they don't want to close the door behind them. They're happy to have other legal immigrants come in and follow the same rules and go through the same steps that they did. They're just saying, why are we letting in millions of people who followed no rules at all and who are getting put up in luxury hotels in Midtown Manhattan? It's an absolute outrage. And what's happened over the last 20 years, I think, is the liberals and the open borders advocates have been able to utterly try to blur the lines between legal and illegal immigration, and they act like all immigration is the same. And it's, you know, trying to turn America into a gorgeous mosaic. But instead, they're hurting the country.
Yeah, and you know what? And this is policy, right? Because honestly, the debate that I have with my friends and stuff like that, it comes down to right now we have an administration, the people that are in charge of running our country are telling people at the border, you are legally allowed to come in and seek asylum here. Even if you don't get it, you could hang out here for a year while you're seeking asylum. And that's why people are coming in. And I think in their defense, how can I call them an illegal immigrant if my president is opening the front door for them? However, we have some senators that are taking the Biden administration to task, like Josh Hawley, who had some really tough questions for the impeached Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas. Listen to this.
A whistleblower from your agency of Homeland Security Investigations has come to me and has said that special agents who are working on child trafficking cases and fentanyl interdiction cases have been pulled off of their investigations and sent to the southern border. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these agents at a time, taken out of the field, taken off child exploitation cases, and sent to the southern border. Here's some of what she said. She said, we're being told to shut down investigations, to go hand out sandwiches and escort migrants to the shower and sit with them while they're in the hospital, and those types of tasks. Mr. Secretary, you're taking special agents away from investigating child traffickers and child exploitation when you've lost tens of thousands of kids to traffickers, and you're sending them to make sandwiches at the border. What is going on?
And that's what I want to know. I want to know what is going on. I want to know what Alejandro Mayorkas had to say, because this is honestly a travesty to hear that all of this is going on, that you have agents being pulled away from important work to go make sandwiches. Dennis Kneale, your thoughts?
Well, not just for important work. I mean, it's almost a comedy sketch because they're being pulled off of child trafficking and fentanyl when the border crisis is a source of child trafficking and fentanyl. And then they're sending them to the border not to go after child trafficking and fentanyl, but to hand out sandwiches. What the heck is going on? My guess, Rich, is that Yorkie, his answer was something like, and didn't have much to say.
Folks, we're on with Dennis Kneale. Now, Dennis Kneale, when we look at this, debacle, conundrum, disaster that we have at the southern border, it's one of many problems that we have as a country and that Biden has as a president, right? As a politician, this is a problem for him because he seemingly is willing and wanting to do this because he's succumbing to the pressure of, I'm going to say, the extreme left, the far left, the radical left in his party. And I feel like most people don't want this unchecked immigration, but there are people that are rather extreme and radical that do want it. And he gave in on that. And he seems to be very comfortable with it. So it's created a problem for him because it's hurting him in the polls. It's hurting him in his reelection. He's also hurting on the economy. So go ahead.
In many ways, and it's hurting him among forgive me, Rich, but I'll forget what I say, what I want to say. Otherwise, it's hurting him among Black and Hispanic voters. Especially because Trump in those 6 swing states, I believe he's actually ahead among Hispanics, and he's polling higher among Blacks than any Republican ever has. And one reason is because Blacks and Hispanics are the most directly and immediately affected in terms of the wage levels. They go down, and jobs, they are less available because illegal immigrants come in and get those lower level jobs and take down the actual wages. And so people who are working blue collar jobs like Blacks and Hispanics are more affected by that. And so that's why that Bronx incredible rally happened with Trump just yesterday.
Dennis Kneale, stick with me. We're going to continue. There's a couple of clips of audio I'd like to play for you regarding that rally that President Trump had in the Bronx. Folks, we're on with Dennis Kneale. You know him from CNBC, and he's a former managing editor at Forbes magazine. We're coming right back. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
It's too much crime. Everything is going downhill. The economy is going bad. The food is expensive. It's like affordable housing is not for everybody. It's just horrible.
I want food to go cheaper. The gas, I want gas cheaper. When I came and he was the president, the gas was a lot cheaper than it is right now.
Now we're becoming the Bronx second-class citizens. We have this influx of migrants are coming in, and they're getting everything. And everyone in the Bronx, in the city of New York, is forgotten.
We had the greatest economy in history. Everybody here, where you have a small business or if you had a job, you were getting more than you ever made. And we had no inflation. We had no 1.4%, considered none, considered better than none, because frankly, none in its own way is a bad thing also. We had a perfect number, 1.4%. It doesn't matter whether you're black or brown or white or whatever the hell color you are, it doesn't matter. We are all Americans, and we're going to pull together as Americans.
And that is the USA chant that broke out in the Bronx at Crotona Park. I was there. It was quite an event. And Dennis Kneale, you heard some of the folks at the rally discussing what they think about the economy. You've heard Trump addressing this crowd that was largely Hispanic and black. And again, I think that's important because it's indicative that they're the people that live in the Bronx. It wasn't like they brought in a few tractor trailers worth of people to fill up the rally. It was the people from the community that came to the rally, and they were incredibly enthusiastic. And Dennis Kneale, it goes right to what you were saying before, that people are tired of it. And even Bill Clinton, right, the Raging Cajun, it's the economy, stupid. And I think ultimately people look at the economy and they say, you know what, give me Trump. What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. You know, I helped Lou Dobbs, the former Fox anchor, write a book on Trump called The Trump Century. And it laid out in his first 3 years, because we did the book right before COVID really took hold. It had just arrived. In those first 3 years, we analyzed that presidency of Trump. And do you know that in that time, black wages, Hispanic wages, Asian wages, women wages all hit all-time highs? In that time of Trump, the difference between black and white unemployment, which always, in good times and bad, blacks' unemployment was like 2 times the rate of white unemployment. Well, that gap narrowed 20% for the first time in 50 years of record keeping under Trump. And so people felt that. And then when you have this inflation problem, right, and you at the gas pump and for food, you know, the news stories come out, Rich, and they say, well, you know, prices, you know, rose at 3.6%, you know, excluding food and gasoline. Well, people can't exclude food and gasoline. They have to buy it. And so the inflation rate is even higher than reported, but it also is the most visible pulse points are those two things when you're in that grocery store. I just went, you know, to get some good stuff for grilling this weekend. And man, I could not believe the total money I had to spend. You feel it in the biggest way. But then you have a President Biden who comes out, because while Trump is a businessman, and he talked to them like a businessman, and that was an interesting thing. But Biden, he's blaming shrinkflation. He's blaming, you know, them for putting fewer potato chips in a smaller bag and charging the same old price. He just doesn't get it at all.
Corporate greed, he says.
Yeah. You know, Rich, one other thing that got me is, here this guy is Trump. He's a billionaire. He doesn't have a whole lot in common with these people of the Bronx, really, right? I mean,
I think he does.
He talked about playing golf.
Trump's such a regular guy, right? Trump is the only billionaire I know that eats McDonald's on a regular basis. He drinks Diet Cokes. He's a real man of the people. He goes out into the Bronx to campaign when he doesn't have to. He likely isn't going to carry the Bronx. And he's a New Yorker, and he's so genuine in his approach to life. Even though he's a billionaire and he builds these big buildings, I think ultimately he's got more in common with them than he doesn't. That's just my thought. But go right ahead.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And it fascinates me that he's able to bond with them. I mean, he was talking to them about golf courses and what a beautiful golf course he built. Well, most of those people probably haven't played golf, and they don't care, and yet they're willing to listen. And one reason they're willing to listen, I think, is because he doesn't give speeches and oratory. And, you know, he goes off a script so much and is talking. And it's like you're sitting there having a beer with the guy. And I actually sat with Trump some years ago before he ran for president. I sat with him at a dinner for 6 people, and he was just the most affable, nice guy, going around the table, asking everyone else about themselves. And he he's one of those guys. In Clinton, I met Clinton in person a time or two also, and he had the same trait. They're so eager to be loved, and they're so eager to impress, even though they are impressive. They don't have to.
But you know what's interesting,
work.
Dennis Kneale, is that while they're trying to impress and they're trying to reach people and they're trying to they're making this connection with people, the media is always against them. And one of the craziest things I saw, again, being there, I saw all the people that were there. I found it incredible that CNN and others in the media would try to hit them on crowd size and say that there wasn't that many people when they only applied for a permit for 3,500 people. Kristen Holmes on CNN, that she was, the proof was in the pudding. She spoke with the people. She saw it with her own eyes, and she had to report the truth. Dennis Kneale.
Yeah, every now and then a rare thing happens, and a CNN reporter stumbles upon the truth and actually then reveals it because she didn't have time to hide it when it's a truth they don't want to tell. Well, you probably already said this on your show, Rich, because you know this kind of stuff. But I think Reagan was the last Republican presidential candidate to visit the Bronx, and Trump hadn't been in New York at all in, 8 years or something. So it's such a coup. And seeing AOC, who seeing her get so just apoplectic and upset about this, this woman who is this fake Latina, she's the mamacita from the barrio when really she left the Bronx at age 5. She grew up in the IBM town of Yorktown Heights, and she was known as Sandy Ocasio. But now she's, she was so upset about it and so perturbed and was razzing him and thought this would be a debacle and an embarrassment. And instead, this guy had thousands of people there. They're saying 25 or 30,000, right? Showed up.
Yeah, I for sure, again, just from, I've spoken, the biggest crowd I've ever spoken to was about 5,000 people. And I saw about 4 sets of that size crowd in this event by the time I was, and I left, and there were still at least 10,000 people online to get in.
Can I ask you some questions about the rally? Because I did not go there. Now, how much of the crowd was those MAGA red cap wearing, a lot of 70%, white Americans?
70% were wearing hats. They weren't white, though. They were black people and Hispanic people.
Okay, but what percentage of the crowd were the locals versus supporters who go to all the different rallies and they're out-of-towners and they came in for it?
There was very little out-of-towners because there wasn't anywhere for them to be. The typical Trump rally is usually in a place where you can invite that type of fanfare, right? So you can get people that show up, retirees, people that serve that are now in retirement, that, they make it their business to go to every Trump rally, and they show up in their RV. And or with a fifth wheel attached to their truck. That wasn't possible here. I barely got a spot. It was very tight. Again, it's the Bronx. There's alternate side of the street. The streets were closed. It was very tough. Yeah, no, these were all local people. There was the campaign staff and stuff like that. Were not local people, but I would say good 80% had to be local.
And did you get the feeling that rather than it being a bunch of longtime Trump loyalists, instead of people who are kind of turning out and wanted to see and listen and kind of curious?
I would say that was probably 50-50. I'd say a good half. And from my view, I wasn't seeking out those longtime Trump loyalists, right? People like me that have been on board with Trump. I was really trying to find out who some of these people were. So as I had met them and said hello to a lot of people, the majority of the people I met, so 8 out of 10, I would ask them, did you vote for Trump last time? The majority said no. They didn't vote for Trump last time. The majority said they voted for Obama. So these are Democrats. It was filled with Democrats in the Bronx. Democrat heaven, right? It's 87% Democrat. They were the ones that made this rally happen, and they were there for Trump.
You know what? I don't know, but maybe some election expert would contradict me here. But I think when people turn out to an actual rally, when they get up off the sofa, man, get up off the bar stool and go out there to see this guy, Trump, I think that shows a certain level of passion and a certain level of willingness to do something about it.
I would agree with you, but I would also say that I had an election guy on the show from another country. And he was his thought was that rallies are the worst things you could do as a campaign because getting somebody to a rally is fun, but it doesn't get them to the poll and it doesn't guarantee you a vote. So I think I have a mixed reaction, kind of like you do on that particular point. But Dennis Kneale, I got to take a pause right here. When we come back, I want to talk about Memorial Day weekend, right? Because so many of us are going to be off on Monday. And for me, I'm actually going to be off for a couple of more days after that. But I want to talk about what Biden is doing to try and make gas prices a little bit better for Memorial Day. And this type of trickery I don't think is going to work. Stick with me. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
While some parts of the country may see some relief with lower gas prices, Chicago may not feel the same effects. By releasing 1 million barrels, storage sites in New Jersey and Maine will be depleted. The gasoline will be sold in increments of 100,000 barrels at a time. And while the Biden administration says it is laser focused on easing the burden of high gas prices for Americans this summer, experts say Chicagoans shouldn't hold their breath. Phil Flynn, senior market analyst at the Price Futures Group, says that recent production issues at local refineries, including fires that disrupted operations, could mean we won't see a dip in prices. Plus, he adds that where we will see a dip likely won't stay that way for long.
It's going to be short-term relief because the government is now getting involved in messing with the process of supply and demand. Refiners look at refining margins as a key as to how much product to make, not only today, but in the future. When the government intervenes in that process, the refiners have to cut back on production. And while that may bring prices down in the short term, later on in the year, maybe right after the election, prices are going to soar.
Casey Cronus, Fox 32, Chicago.
Dennis Kneale, you heard the report from Fox there. And do you think this is going to work? Is this going to shoot his popularity sky high and bring down the price of gasoline drastically?
The only upside to what he's doing here is that it looks like he's trying. So some voters might say, well, gosh, at least he's trying. But this is a pittance. Understand, this is 1 million barrels that he's releasing. It's from something called the Northeast Gasoline Supply Reserve, which was already legislated to go out of existence, so they had to put it somewhere. It's just that he's releasing it out onto the market instead of putting it into our actual strategic petroleum reserve. Now, the strategic petroleum reserve, which usually, I did look up some of this stuff for you to have some stuff to say. It's like over 700 million barrels, okay, of crude. Okay, but in June of 2022, Biden released 200 million barrels of that 700 or so, okay, on the market, trying to take those gas prices down. Now, here's what's wrong with that. That's supposed to be an emergency reserve. We're now down to 350 million. That's less than half of what it's supposed to be at. So you're doing that purely for political purposes. That was right before the midterms, right? 2022. That's why he did it. And yet, dude, your policies, Biden, are stopping drillers from being able to provide more supply. Remember, under Trump, we became the #1 producer of gas and nat gas and oil, right? And yet Biden has restricted it. And just the other day, you heard that report say the Biden administration says it's doing everything it can. It's laser focused on keeping prices down, Rich. But do you know, just the other day, the Biden administration restricted drilling on 2 parts of oil and gas land, in federal land in Alaska. And in one case, 23 million acres, Biden took 13 million acres of that land and put it off limits for drilling, even though that tract had been set aside in 1923 specifically and expressly for oil and nat gas development. This was, the Biden administration did this even though local state officials want it, and even local native tribes want it. And yet still Biden said, no, we're not going to drill on half of that thing. So and when you're an oil driller, I'm sorry to filibuster here, Rich, I'll be done right after this. When you're an oil driller, you're not just thinking today, you're looking out 6 months, 12 months out, what's the supply and demand, et cetera. And when your government is still hamstringing you and reducing your ability to produce more of what's a good thing that could make you rich, that kind of blunts your outlook. That makes you feel like I'm going to pull my elbows in. I'm not going to be able to drill as much. And that means prices will not go down, and they won't go down in time for the election.
Dennis Kneale, stick with me. I want you to tell everybody about your really, really terrific podcast called What's Bugging Me on the Ricochet Network. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back, familia. We continue our discussion with Dennis Kneale. He is the host of the What's Bugging Me podcast. And Dennis Kneale, tell everybody all about What's Bugging Me. What can they expect to hear and how can they hear it?
Well, go look at the Ricochet Network or Apple Podcasts or Spotify and wherever you listen to pods and check out What's Bugging Me. The episode up just yesterday. You can listen to it this weekend. I interviewed the author, Larry Ingrassia, his old friend of mine. We worked at the Wall Street Journal together years ago. And Larry has a new book out called The Fatal Inheritance. His brother, his mother, his 2 sisters, his nephew, all died of cancer. So he went on a medical detective story to try to find out why. And for anyone out there who has cancer in their family, it's a fascinating book. It's a fascinating conversation. It's very touching, and yet it's also quite informative. You might want to check it out.
And how do people do that? Just through their podcast platform, or is
wherever you listen? Yeah, because it's right there on Apple Podcasts. Yeah, right there on Apple Podcasts, and you can follow me on social media at Dennis Kneale, and it's on Apple Podcasts. And the Ricochet Network is my home base. It's a conservative outfit of like-minded people who are on the right side of things.
Outstanding.
And I do mean right.
That is right. Dennis Kneale, I want to thank you for staying up late with me and having this conversation. I appreciate you. You're a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. Godspeed, sir.
All right, my friend. Thanks so much.
You bet. All right, amigos, we continue our conversation straight ahead at hour number 2. And we're going to get into some stories from veterans as we kick off this Memorial Day weekend, remembering the service, remembering the fallen. And, of course, your calls are coming up in Open Phone America. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Your liberty-loving Latino amigo, happy to be here with you this Friday night. We're live, we're national. I'm keeping you company straight till 1 a.m. And if you want to join, Eastern time, that is, and if you want to join our late-night national conversation, feel free. Give me a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And the campaign continues for 2024. RFK Jr. is out on the campaign trail, slamming Donald Trump, blaming him for lockdowns, and got a standing ovation from libertarians. I don't know how much that's going to help him on Election Day, but I can't wait to see. I really can't. Let's see. We've got other news as well. You've got Trump. He teased 4 potential vice presidential picks. None of them were the people I pick when I play this out in my head. But he teased, and again, I don't know if these are the only 4, but at a campaign stop yesterday, the big rally in the Bronx, he did an interview at News 12, local channel, and he said some of the possible vice presidential picks are these, as the list is shortening. And these are the names. Senator Marco Rubio from Florida, Dr. Ben Carson, former HUD secretary, Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, and Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. She's the conference chair of the Republican Party, and she's out of New York. So that is the what he's put out there. Again, my pick remains Byron Donalds. I think Congressman Byron Donalds from Naples, Florida is my pick, and I understand the implications of electoral votes and whatnot because they're both from Florida. But I don't care. I think ultimately a Trump-Donalds ticket is Donald and Donalds. That's pretty funny. I think those guys would really just sail through the finish line. My opinion only. Anyway, other things I want to get into. As we know, we just talked about Biden's scheme to try to make good this Memorial Day weekend as he puts out 1 million barrels of gas so that people will have a better time at the pump. Many say this is too little and definitely too late, and it's not going to make the impact that he thinks it's going to make. I tend to agree with that. But it doesn't mean that the world stops moving, right? I mean, people are going to continue to do what they do to memorialize the fallen, right? They're going to go to their cemeteries. They're going to visit those that we've lost in combat, and that doesn't stop. And, of course, America will take some time off to remember those that have served and those that have given the ultimate sacrifice. So I want to speak with a veterans advocate that has an amazing story, and I can't tell her story for her, but she's going to tell it for herself. She's from Washington State. She's actually running for the U.S. House in Washington State's 4th District. She's a veterans advocate. Her name is Tiffany Smiley, and I want to welcome her. Tiffany, welcome to the program.
Hi, Rich. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Likewise. Thank you. And tell us a little bit about you, your background, how you grew up, and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, never in a million years did our family ever think that we would be involved in politics. But here we are. Our country, needs strong patriots who are willing to fight for the future for our children. I grew up on a farm in Pasco, Washington, just a small town farm girl, and always wanted to be a nurse. That's what I did when I graduated. I just wanted to help people, and married my high school sweetheart, Scotty Smiley, who was a newly commissioned officer from the United States Military Academy. So, in some ways it was like, the picture of the American dream. I was a nurse. He was a military officer. My new last name was Smiley. It doesn't get very, very much more American than that.
Yeah.
But at that time we were, that was in 2003. We were well into Afghanistan and Iraq. Obviously 9/11 happened when we were in college. So we knew the implications of service to our country. It was really real. We had friends that were already, being injured or coming back. And I mean, it was heavy fighting. It was a new war. It was terrorism. And, unfortunately our life forever changed on April 6th of 2005 when I was awoken out of bed before my nursing shift and, excitedly answered the phone because Scotty would call at all different times while he was deployed in Mosul, Iraq. But this time when I answered, it was someone else's voice on the other end of the line. And, they just started crying. They're like, I'm so sorry. Like, we don't even know if Scotty's going to make it. He came face to face with a suicide car bomb, and the bomb detonated. One thing we know is like he doesn't have any eyes; they're gone, and we don't know if he'll survive. So,
wow,
that was a day that our quote unquote American dream blew up into a million pieces. And I resigned from my nursing job. I took a one-way flight from Washington State out to Washington, D.C. to meet Scotty at Walter Reed. And I didn't know if I was going to meet him dead or alive. And, at 23, your whole life ahead of you, it was a difficult time. I mean, it was a real sacrifice. And, as a nurse, I knew that I could help Scotty get well again. I knew that. But I made a promise to myself that I would come back and make it right for everyone else, because it was the first time that I experienced government dysfunction. And I saw firsthand the roadblocks and the red tape and the bureaucracy and the politicians. Like, I saw all of it. And it was completely unacceptable to me. I thought it was so wrong. I thought it was disgusting how we treat our veterans, not just our veterans, but even their families, their caregivers, the people who, will be impacting their life and their care. It really hurt me. It made me upset that this is how our country operates. So I, since that day, have been on a mission to change the government from the outside and do everything I can. I was brought into a room with VA officials, medical officials, since I was Scotty's power of attorney, and they said, sign right here on the dotted line, Mrs. Smiley, and we will begin your husband's medical retirement. And I had a lot of questions for them. Scotty was in a medically induced coma. I'm like, they couldn't answer my questions, or better yet, their responses I didn't think were, adequate for what he had given.
Yeah, that's very frustrating when people give you an answer that's kind of half-baked.
Yep. And I just looked at them. I said, no, I'm not signing it. I said, they pushed it in front of me again and said, well, Mrs. Smiley, we don't think you understand. Your husband has no eyes. There has never been someone to continue service to our country blind. Sign the paperwork. So I refused a second time. I was able to build a coalition who believed in this vision to allow our catastrophically injured veterans to fully recover before they even visit that process. And it's actually allowed many more catastrophically injured veterans to continue service if they want. But ultimately, my husband went on and became the first blind active duty officer to ever serve our country. So we served for a whole nother decade with him completely blind, something that had never been done before.
That's amazing. Tiffany Smiley, I want you to stick with me. I want to get the rest of your story and hear more about it. Incredible, very moving story. I have so many questions, I don't know where to begin. But, folks, we're on with Tiffany Smiley. She's a candidate for the U.S. House in Washington, 4th District. And you heard the story. We're going to come right back, pick up where she left off, and learn more about her campaign. Keep it locked right here. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue our conversation with Tiffany Smiley. She's a candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives in Washington's 4th District, and she's a veterans advocate and became one because of happenstance, right? Life happened. Her husband is an American hero. Scotty was serving in Mosul, Iraq, and was hit by a roadside bomb, became blind, and was being pushed into a medical retirement by the United States military. She said, no, we're not doing that. Tell us why you said no, where you found the courage to say no, and how that played out.
Yes, well, being a nurse, we are the staunchest advocates that you could ever find. And I just knew that I had just walked in and whispered in Scotty's ear while he was in and out of a coma that he would never see again. And I knew the next thing I didn't want to whisper in his ear is I just signed away, the very thing that gave him purpose. I truly believed in the holistic picture, that to give him motivation and encouragement to get up and fight on, to have a purpose was so important. And indeed, that theory proved to be true. And he was still an asset to the military, an incredible asset. And a lot of our catastrophically injured veterans can continue to be assets to our country, and earn the respect and the dignity and the honor, and the job upward mobility that our country owes them. So I took it more from a holistic perspective. And, I was kind of mentioning, being at Walter Reed at 23 in 2005, and it was some of the heaviest fighting we had ever seen in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so I saw, the casualties coming in every day, and I knew I could help Scotty, but I made a promise to come back and make it right for everyone else. So that sort of began our political journey. I would go to Capitol Hill and take meetings with anyone who would take a meeting with me to fight for injured veterans, to fight for their families, because I knew how hard it was for us. And I kept thinking, what is happening to everyone else? That's where I kind of saw behind the curtain of our government. And, why does Congress have the lowest, approval ratings? Like, we need to change this in our country. And so that just led us down a path. I was able to work with President Trump on real reform for injured veterans and their families, that they could have health care down the street or around the corner versus driving miles or spending days just to get the care that they earned. And so sort of got into politics in that sense. And, for 20 years, I've dedicated my life to changing it from the outside. And now our family knows now is the time to stand up and fight and change our government from the inside. And that's why I'm running for Congress in Washington's 4th Congressional District. We are a very conservative district, a very Republican district, a red district in the heart of Washington state. We have an opportunity from this district to lead for all of Washington state in this country. And anyone can check us out and chip in and help us out, because this isn't just about Washington state. This is about the future for our children. This election coming up is so important. It is so important to our family that we preserve and protect the American dream. And not only that, that we protect the citizens of this country. So anyone can join me at TiffanySmileyForCongress.com. You can chip in, you can join our fight. We have a real opportunity to get, I was saying, like, real patriots, real Americans that want the best for this country, not the best for their political career. We need to elect Donald Trump. That's what I am fighting for every single day. We need Donald Trump's policies now more than ever. We have got to secure our border and stop the flow of fentanyl from coming into our communities. They're coming right into the 4th Congressional District. Not only that, higher crime. We have to make sure that we unleash American energy independence to lower the cost of gas and diesel, which will in turn help with the skyrocketing inflation that we are facing and lowering the cost of goods. So there's a lot of work to be done to get this country on the right track. I have great hope. Me and Scotty have been in very dark, seemingly hopeless situations. But I also know the goodness of this country. And in no other country could you go take on the DOD and take on, the VA and fight for a better way, fight for my husband to stay on active duty. In no other country could you do that. So we live in the best country on earth as long as we continue to have the courage to fight for it.
Tiffany Smiley is our guest. What a moving story. Both the way your service to your family, to your husband, and how that's kind of produced this service to your country and to veterans at large.
Yes.
What does the road look like? 'Cause I guess I don't know how to say this in any softer way. You seem like an incredibly nice person, almost too nice for Congress. Does that concern you?
I'm a farm girl, so I'm built pretty tough. And I think that's what we need in Congress. We need tough and grit, toughness and grit. And I wasn't afraid to stare down those VA officials and Army officials and tell them, no, I'm not doing something because I just knew it wasn't right. So I will take that same fire, that same grit, and and that same can-do attitude all the way to the halls of Congress. And that's exactly what the people in the 4th Congressional District want. It's what we need in this country. And it would be an honor of a lifetime to work hard and serve the amazing people that, I grew up with and that were there for me and Scotty when our life was blown into a million pieces. That it's the full picture of the American dream where we started this whole story, that it's really about, each and every one of us doing what we can. And pitching in and fighting for a better future and fighting for a better America. I do believe that our best days are ahead of us. And for me and Scotty, we want to know that we are doing everything that we can to leave our 3 boys a country that is worth losing their eyesight for.
Tiffany Smiley, in the minute and a half we have remaining, what does your your Memorial Day plans for the weekend, what does that look like?
Yeah, so me and Scotty will be joining a Memorial Day ceremony at a very large cemetery in Richland, Washington. So in our hometown district, we will partake in the whole ceremony. My husband will be speaking. I spoke at it last year, and it's just beautiful. They have flags lining the whole drive in the cemetery. They have a parachuter come down with an American flag, and it's just, it brings tears to my eyes every single year when we sit back and remember, those that paid the ultimate sacrifice. And I have many friends, who have raised kids alone. And, for them, every day is Memorial Day. So for our family, it's heartfelt, it's emotional, and it's a reminder that freedom is not free.
Amen to that. Tiffany Smiley, folks, check out her website, TiffanySmileyForCongress.com. Tiffany Smiley, let them know how they can follow you on social media.
Yes, Twitter, Smiley for Washington, Instagram and Facebook. Come check us out, follow along. I would love to hear from you. Smiley for Washington are my social media handles, and then Tiffany Smiley for Congress.com. It is time to get this country back on track, and I appreciate each and every one of you listeners who are tuning in. This is an important election, and I always say everyone should be involved in politics at this point. So make sure you go vote and check out Tiffany Smiley for Congress.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany, and Godspeed to you. Folks, we're coming up with another story, this one about a veteran from World War II. That's coming up straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. Again, the number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Keep it locked right here.
Rich Valdez, who, again, will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to him.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, as we kick off Memorial Day weekend, we remember the fallen, and there's many that have fallen in defense of the American experience, and I don't want that ever to be lost on any of us, and I doubt that it ever is. And while we celebrate, right, and we enjoy, we have hot dogs and hamburgers and beer and time off, and I'll be off till June 4th. And our buddy, it's going to be Dom time these days. Our buddy Dom Giordano is going to be holding it down from Philly while we handle some issues here in the studio. But we have to always stay focused on the sacrifice that others have given, up to and including, especially on Memorial Day, those that gave their lives. And not just recent ones, right? You know, my brother who served, and many of your families have served, and shout out to all the veterans. But there are some that died in service, and it's them that we remember this weekend. And World War II was a time where we lost a lot of men. We lost a lot of American blood for something that I'd say most of us agree was a noble cause, freeing the world from fascism. But it didn't come easily. And somebody who understands this is a former park ranger at Gettysburg, and he's the host of Real History on YouTube, assistant teaching professor of history at Penn State. Dr. Jared Frederick is our guest. Sir, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I want to discuss your book. You've co-authored this book, Into the Blue, My World War II Journeys with the Mighty 88th Air Force. And your co-author is a 100-year-old World War II veteran. I think this alone is fascinating because I once spoke with a man in his 90s who was a World War II veteran, and it was one of the most fascinating interviews I'd ever done in my life, let alone conversations that I've had in my life. They don't call them the greatest generation for nothing, do they?
Very much so. John is a very unique individual, not only because he's in a very small statistic now of surviving World War II veterans. Of the 16 million Americans who served during World War II, there's less than 1% of them who are still with us. And that's a very sobering fact. And now is the moment to recognize the stories of those who remain. And that is in no small part what he and I set out to do as we co-authored Into the Cold Blue together.
Well, let's dig into the book. We've got 3 segments to do it, so whatever your comments are going to be, I recommend splitting them into 3 so that we could kind of make them into bite-sized chunks for radio. But I'm sure there's plenty to talk about, right? I mean, you're an expert at this, and you've written this book on it. And this is a topic that I think myself and the audience, we always enjoy hearing about because it's so enthralling. It really draws you in because it's, especially when you're getting it with a co-author that was there and is 100-year-old, like this other gentleman that I spoke with. That it's just such an eye-opening experience. So tell me, how did you meet John Hohmann, and how did you score this co-author?
We had a number of passing interactions over the years, sometimes at museum or university lectures. But I had never really had anything more than a superficial conversation with him about his wartime endeavors. And therefore, about 2 years ago, a mutual friend of ours reintroduced us, and she encouraged me to reach out to him and sit down for a more formal recorded interview so I could absorb his stories. And about 35 minutes into his storytelling, I said, John, I think your story is worthy of a book. This is just astounding, and the level of detail was so compelling. And his immediate reply was, well, we better get started because I have an expiration date. And so he still had a little bit of that airman's gallows humor that was so definitive of a lot of people of his generation. And so in the months following that, we sat down for about 15 in-depth interviews where we started from his earliest memories from 97 years ago and going all throughout the Second World War and beyond. And something that really helped us was the fact that he so thoroughly documented everything. He still had all of his official reports, his logbooks. We found reminiscences and letters of his crewmates. Just this incredible mountain of information combined with his very sharp memory. And it was a historian's dream come true.
Well, Doc, tell us a little bit about, I guess, the story that, first popped out for you that really kind of jumped off the page from his reports that you guys decided to put into the book.
I would say a standout moment from his recollections were his memories of a mission that took place on September 18th, 1944. Some of your listeners might be familiar with the book and the movie A Bridge Too Far, a classic movie of the genre. And that is a movie that chronicles an ill-fated Allied campaign that was going to try to bring the war to an end by the conclusion of 1944. And it was a mission on a broad scale that completely depended upon timing and logistics, both of which failed monumentally and had major backlash on the Allied forces. John's part in it, though, was to drop supplies by air to surrounded paratroopers of the 82nd Airborne Division. And they were dropping these supplies largely in enemy territory at 500 feet altitude. And after they dropped the supplies, he said that everything seemed to go wrong at once.
Wow.
Both of the engines went out. Their tail was shot to pieces. The hydraulics went kaput. Smoke filled the interior of the cabin, so much so that he couldn't see his co-pilot, who was sitting 2 feet away from him. Their plane was riddled with shot and shell. They somehow were able to gain altitude and limp their way across the North Sea to an emergency landing strip in England. And when they arrived at that emergency landing strip, they noticed that there was another one of their planes that had crash landed there and was on the ground burning, and they had to avoid it as they were doing their own emergency landing. And then finally, after their approach, when they touched down on the ground, they discovered that one of their tires was shot out also.
Oh, wow.
So 2 engines, a tail, no hydraulics, one of your 2 tires shot out. And somehow every man aboard survived that emergency crash. And
Murphy's Law kicks in, right? Whatever can go wrong will go wrong.
And it seemingly did, except the fact that every single man walked away, which is a miracle in and of its own right.
Yeah, what a story. Folks, we're on with Jared Frederick. Dr. Frederick is the author of the book, Into the Cold Blue, My World War II Journeys with the Mighty 8th Air Force. Co-author on the book is John F. Homan. He's a 100-year-old World War II veteran that's still around. God bless him. And we're going to come back and continue discussing the book with Dr. Frederick. Keep it locked right here.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Dr. Jared Frederick. He's the author of the new book, Into the Cold Blue, My World War II Journeys with the Mighty 8th Air Force. His co-author is John F. Homan, who's a 100-year-old World War II veteran. And, Professor, tell us the next big story that really jumped off the page from Mr. Homan's records.
Yeah, some of the most revealing stories actually had nothing to do with combat. There are many anecdotes about what he did during downtime, because I think the best way to describe it is that a lot of these airmen were living on an emotional roller coaster of highs and lows. Their lives were punctuated by these terrifying missions that took place sometimes in sub-zero temperatures. None of their airplanes were compressed. They ran the gauntlet of enemy fire. And in some instances, John saw his friends blow up right in front of him, planes that were nearby. He one time saw a German pilot bail from his airplane, but his parachute was on fire.
Wow.
These were the sorts of things that he was seeing on a daily basis. And he had to compartmentalize in order to focus and to get the job done. He said you had to look at it from that psychological perspective, or there is no way that you would be able to do your job. And so one thing that they would often do whenever possible is that they would have leaves or weekend passes in London. His airbase was located in East Anglia, which was a very rural, isolated region along the British coast. And so these brief reprieves in London were something that were highly desired. And he said something that really stuck out to him when he went to this massive cosmopolitan city was just how many nationalities were there. He said there were people from Australia and South Africa, New Zealand, Free Dutch and Free French, Canadians, Americans, people from every walk of life and this vast spectrum of humanity. And he said, really for the first time, the idea that this truly was a world war, it seemed like the entire world was in London. And he said that was something that was very much a revelation to him. But then, of course, there were also the fun sides to it. How did World War II soldiers blow off steam during their downtime? And oftentimes this would lead to a lot of colorful escapades in some of the neighborhoods of London. There's one particularly interesting story where he and his fellow officers found a London speakeasy, and one of them had gained the password to get them in, and they wanted nothing more than to enjoy a bottle of scotch and have a night on the town. And as they are watching the show, a bottle flies out of the darkness and hits the singer on the stage. And the singer finished his song, and he said the man who threw that bottle should be man enough to stand up and admit it. And unfortunately for a intoxicated Dutch paratrooper who didn't speak English in the back of the room, happened to stand up at the same time to head to the restroom. And the singer thought that that was the culprit. And John said it seemed like a Hollywood movie because the next thing that happened is that the whole bar broke out in this huge fight among service members and civilians. And so it's those stories as well that I think that we should remember because it humanizes the experiences of these people. We have statues of them. We have them on a pedestal. They are our national heroes. But they were also 19 and 20-year-old kids as well. And in some ways, they were a lot like us.
Wow. That's quite the story. It really is. I can't wait to, I'm going to be off until for a few days, and I'm thinking, this is a book I want to read. Folks, make sure you get a copy of the book. It's Into the Cold Blue, My World War II Journeys with the Mighty 8th Air Force. Co-author is John F. Homan. He's a 100-year-old World War II veteran. And we're going to continue our discussion on the book with Jared Frederick, who's the author of the book. Straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back, America, and we continue our conversation. This book is one I think you're going to enjoy. It's called Into the Cold Blue, My World War II Journeys with the Mighty 8th Air Force, written by Jared Frederick, and the co-author is John F. Homan. Dr. Frederick, as we wrap, I'd like you to give us what the main takeaway of the book is so the listeners can go out there and buy a bunch of copies of it.
Sure. I think in many ways the final chapters of the book is a call to action. And John looks at it that way through a number of ways. One, he doesn't consider himself a hero, but he does believe and recognize that he experienced some monumental historical events. And he wants his story to offer context about the broader experience of the war. And he hopes that young people in particular might be able to have some sort of resonance with his story. Because after all, he was 19 years old when he signed up. He was 20 years old when he flew 34 combat missions. And last week, we gave a presentation to active duty Air Force personnel, and even they couldn't conceive of some of the stories that he was telling them. But the other thing, too, that I think John would like readers and listeners to think about, he says in the book that democracy is sometimes a messy thing, but it's what we have. And it's something that we must cherish and take care of. It's what his generation fought to save. And he believes that the best way to carry on that tradition is really empathy above all else. Work with our fellow Americans to strive to reach the next level. Build upon the foundation that the World War II generation set for us, and don't squander the second chance that they gave us all those years ago.
Outstanding. Now, let everybody know if there's a particular website where they go to get the book, how do they follow you, and what do they do to get a copy?
The book is available, Into the Cold Blue. It's available at fine booksellers everywhere, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or your local bookstore. I always love supporting local bookstores. And you can follow me on my YouTube channel at Real History. That's REEL. And primarily, I analyze history versus Hollywood on that channel. And so I think that's a fun way to keep in touch with some of my research.
Outstanding. I want to thank you for being with us, Dr. Jared Frederick. You are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. Godspeed to you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, America, we continue our conversation straight ahead. There's a lot more to come. Don't move a muscle. I'm Rich Valdez.
From the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez. Valdez with an S, by the way, and happy to be here with you. It's our Friday night edition. We're live, we're national, broadcasting out of New York. The time here is 7 minutes past midnight, and that makes it technically tomorrow, but it's still the Friday night edition of the program, and I'm happy to be with you. We're here till 1 a.m. Eastern time, and I want to discuss a bunch of things. We're kicking off Memorial Day weekend this weekend. We've got a wonderful, I like to call them greatest hits prepared for you on Monday. And for the rest of the week, it's Dom time. My buddy Dom Giordano is going to be joining us while we handle some stuff that needs to be handled in the studio. He'll be on the air in my absence. So I'm going to be off for a few days, and I'm looking forward to a little bit of sun and catching up on things, as many of you are as well, after the holiday weekend. And I want to have a conversation tonight about lots of things, right? Lots of things that are going on. A couple of days back, the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, my beloved birth state, Kathy Hochul says that these kids in the Bronx don't even know how to spell the word computer. And of course, some people were outraged and others were, just kind of like, oh yeah, I guess we expect her to say stupid things like that. And she's back at it. Now she's there insulting the people that went to the Trump rally yesterday, saying they're clowns. And never addressing the real issues like crime and other things that are really plaguing the state that she's in. And the reason they're being plagued is because while some may think there's a place for bail reform is a good thing. Well, I don't think it is. And I think the proof is in the pudding when you see crime rates increasing because people are more inclined to commit crimes when they know they can walk right out and commit a third and a fourth and a fifth and sometimes a 10th crime because you're no longer held on bail. And you see, that's what kind of makes society safe when you have these repeat offenders that are held on bail. Now, judges have some discretion, but for the most part, they don't because it's a state law in New York. But Kathy Hochul, she goes on to say that the Trump folks or the Trump supporters are clowns. Listen to this.
Well, I'll tell you, it won't make a difference at all, Jake, and that is for Donald Trump to be the ringleader of and invite all his clowns to a place like the Bronx. New York will never, ever support Donald Trump for president. We know him better than anyone, and that means we understand what he's all about is just for himself. So this state will go solidly behind Joe Biden for president, as it has in the past. So he wants to spend his time doing these made-up fake rallies and pretending their support here. Be my guest, because while you're doing that, Donald Trump, Joe Biden's out there on the other side making sure he's delivering for all Americans. And so go ahead, spend all your time you want in New York, because we'll be with Joe Biden, and Joe Biden's out there winning over the rest of the battleground states.
I can't wait till this doesn't age well. I really do. I'm looking forward to this. And I think it's already not aging well. And the reason why, because all you've got to do is really play a juxtaposition here, right, of her voice as the voiceover and the videos of the people at the rally yesterday. Black women, Hispanic women, young black girls, young Hispanic girls, right, Jewish families, all sorts of people. And you play that in slow motion and have her go, these people are clowns. That's it. That's all you need to do for people to realize. I've never heard Donald Trump call entire groups of people clowns. I've never heard him say, if you support Joe Biden, you're a clown. Have you? I never heard it. I heard him say, if you're Jewish and you support Joe Biden, you're out of your mind, or something like that. And I think that's specific to Joe Biden's animosity towards Netanyahu and Israel. I get that. But by and large, most politicians don't do these things. They don't go out of their way to alienate entire groups of people. Now, I'm sure somebody's picking up the phone right now and saying, oh, let me call this guy Valdez, 833-4825-337, 833-4-VALDEZ, and let me give him a piece of my mind. Because why? Well, because Trump said there were good people on both sides. Trump's a racist, Trump's a this, and Trump's a that. And to that I say, I think you got to check the transcript and invest a half hour or 40 minutes to really see what he said, when he said it, how he said it, and who he was referring to. And don't let the media tell you what to think. Think for yourself. But Kathy Hochul, she doesn't stop there. She goes on to say that she rejects the Republican narrative that Democrats are really pro-crime progressives. Listen to this.
I will say that Democrats like myself have always said we're against crime. I mean, who is for crime? Let's be serious about this. We are the ones that are out there working against hate crimes and domestic violence and retail theft. I just passed an historic budget with serious laws to protect New Yorkers from retail theft, shutting down illegal cannabis shops. So this whole Republican narrative that Democrats are not, as hard as we need to be on public safety is just false, and no one should be buying it. So I reject that premise. We are out there making sure that our number one priority will continue to be public safety, job number one for all of us.
Well, that's funny, Governor Hochul, because I find that most people that I talk to that live in New York, that live in Chicago, that live in California, L.A., San Francisco, Oakland, these people are terrified of the amount of crime that they see. And they're blaming it all on the Democrats and their soft on crime approach to these George Soros prosecutors? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Let's go to Chicago, WGN, and check in with Diane. Diane, how's crime going in Chicago?
Well, Rich, it's growing and happening every day. And if you look at the detail type of thing of it, or if you if you ride the trains and whatever, and you sort of have the pulse, if you take the time to kind of observe it in that way, the crime is the migrants.
Would you say that crime is under control, that they have it contained in Chicago?
No, because they don't care about it, because it's become a racial thing, and it's become one of those politically correct things. But see, there have been crimes like a crowbar with an ATM. There are many accidents of speeding and people going wrong way on the, and crashing into odd type of crimes. And that's what I meant about the pulse. There's a new type of crime that is being committed by the migrants. There's been break-ins to all kinds of garages, stealing equipment. One bus driver told me, and he was Hispanic himself, an American, and he told me that there was a fellow who got on who had a hammer, and he said he asked him whether he has a hammer, and that guy said in case somebody gets after him, he's going to protect himself. So they've got this mentality of either fearing each other or, this is not a good situation for this whole mob of people to come and sit on top of a city, and you don't do that. You don't come in a group. You come as an individual, as a person with integrity, and climb your ladder with the liberty. You have a right to pursue happiness. You don't have a right to get things. This is all wrong. It's an invasion, and that's what it is. And,
wow.
And the Democrats, their solution is, well, here we've got the mayor who touches on racism. To my mind, Kim Fox says she's very against the police stopping and for a headlight or whatever.
Wow. Let me tell you, Diane, this is, it doesn't surprise me, but it's definitely disappointing. But, Kim Fox and Chicago, I mean, what else can we really expect? It seems like crime continues to be out of control in Chicago. Diane, thank you for your call. I hope you have a blessed Memorial Day weekend. Big shout out to everybody listening in WGN country. Big shout out to you guys. And we're coming right back with the rest of your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. And I want to take a moment to give a quick shout out to TeleSouth. TeleSouth operates WANG, WTNI, WCPR, WGBL, WQBB, WOSM, and several others. And Health South has picked up this program, Rich Valdez, America at Night. Happy to have you guys join us. Happy to join your family. Looking forward to a long and robust relationship with these 12 new affiliates that we've added to the program. So congratulations to everybody. And I wanted to give a big shout out again to TeleSouth. And I also wanted to bring your attention to a story in the BBC. The wreckage of a United States World War II submarine was found after 80 years. The wreckage of a U.S. Navy submarine sank. Sank. The most Japanese warships during World War II has been found in the South China Sea some 80 years, after it was sunk by enemy forces. The USS Harder was found 3,000 feet below the water off the Philippines' northern island of Luzon. Can we credit Gil from Manila? I don't think so, but if we could, I totally would. And the USS Harder was sunk in a battle back on the 29th of August, 1944, with a crew of 79 men. So interesting that we got the ship back. Of course, as we look back at Memorial Day, it's one of those things where you never want to forget the sacrifices that were made. Anyway, I want to continue our conversation. I want to go to Jefferson City, Missouri, and check in with Bill, our unofficial historian here on Rich Valdez America at Night. Bill, how are you, sir? KTTR.
It's a great night. Thanks for the lead-in on submarines. I want to talk to you about a submarine that sank 56 years ago today in the Vietnam era. Nuclear sub ensconced in secrecy at the time, but the Navy eventually recorded that their listening devices figured out that the 24th was the day it was sunk in a deep trench in the Azores. The fellow I want to remember is a guy I went to high school with, Lawton Smith. I remember his name well because I didn't know many people named Lawton. U.S. Academy graduate, student of Admiral Hyman Rickover, who was a kind of an interesting Navy guy. And I learned later that Lawton, there's a place for him in our Jefferson City's Riverview Cemetery, but he's not there. He's still in the sub. So what do you think of that?
That's, well, first of all, I thank you for sharing that story. It's one I probably would not have known about otherwise. And I think it's amazing. It's amazing that, we find these things that, 56 years ago today. Who knew, right? Who knew that these things were happening and how they were happening? Bill, I'm grateful for your leadership on being our unofficial historian here on the program, because I think it adds such a level of panache to this show that we otherwise wouldn't have. Bill in Jefferson City, Missouri, KTTR. Thank you, sir. You are a gentleman, scholar, and a patriot, and I thank you. I want to continue. Let us go to Tampa, Florida, listening to richvaldez.com. Eduardo, what's up, my man?
Yeah, Rich, well, hopefully everybody's going to get out there and visit a cemetery or, go to a parade or something and really think about the people that serve this country. I wanted to comment a little bit about the effects that people have been having. I heard this during the day about some of the ladies have been having breast cancer from COVID vaccines and Lyme disease. Hopefully there's going to be congressional hearings sometime in the future about people getting these COVID vaccines. They want us to get the vaccine, but then they get offended when we tell them about abortion. So that's an interesting thing that people complain about.
Yeah. This is, I think, two separate topics, but the vaccine issue is obviously a serious one, an important one where people clearly, but I get your point, right? The comparison between the two, it's like, my body, my choice, but you got to get it though. My body, my choice. No, you do whatever you want. And of course, it's the double standard that we typically see all the time. And I guess the argument that they're trying to make is, well, me terminating the life of a child is not something that can get you sick. Their belief is that by you getting these vaccines, that you're somehow protecting your grandmother, my grandmother, and everybody else in society. But what we've learned, right, from the professor of health policy over at Stanford, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, and from others, that children who aren't taking vaccines are actually healthier. And that's pretty new news. And that's alarming. And again, I mentioned this the other night, and I'll mention it again because I think it's wrong. I really do. Not because it's against me, but because I think it's wrong. I shared on Instagram, you can share something to your story. And I shared a video that I saw, and I thought that was interesting. And it was a video, again, a cut and paste type of thing. The top of the video was a report from 2020 on vaccines and whatnot, and the AstraZeneca vaccine, when people said, we think we're getting a high degree of blood clots from this vaccine, and AstraZeneca saying, no, those are one-off cases, that's not the case, blah, 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 2020 news report. Then right below it, the next video plays, and that video is from 2024, where they're saying AstraZeneca, in a recent court case, has now decided to, because of blood clots, has decided to pull the vaccine from the entire global market. 2 news reports, I didn't say a word about either one of these, right, Eduardo? I didn't say anything. But they decided to say to me that I was spreading misinformation, that the post was lacking context. It was somebody else's post. And I got dinged for it. You get enough dings and they take you off Instagram. And I think it's incredibly unfair that they do that. And I know they do it because they don't want me talking, or anybody talking, about vaccines and about any harmful effect. And, of course, they cover that up with this argument that you're making, where, I could do what I want with my body, but you can't do whatever you want with yours. And ultimately, that's the reality of it. It's a double standard that's unfair. So I want to encourage you and everybody else, make sure you go to Instagram and follow my stuff, and make sure you interact and comment, because as you do, it gives me a little bit more of a leg to stand on when I complain to them and say, look, I'm not, pulling anybody's leg and saying anything that's wrong. And I'm grateful that you called in with this topic, because I think you're right. Ultimately, you can't have people that say, no, you have to take a vaccine, but no, I don't. My body, my choice. And then these are the people that are, deciding everything in life. It just doesn't work that way. Eduardo, thank you for your call. Big shout out to Tampa, Florida. I hope you have a blessed Memorial Day. And folks, we continue with your calls. We've got calls from Boise, Idaho, Bonners Ferry, Idaho, Zanesville, Ohio, Galesburg, Illinois, and Manila, Philippines. Coming back straight ahead. Keep it locked right here. I'm Rich Valdez.
Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
I will say this rally did look a lot like America. There was a lot of Asian voters there. There were a lot of Hispanic voters, a lot of black voters there, which is not typical for a Trump rally that I go to when I'm in Wisconsin or Michigan. Yeah. So that's what was fascinating.
But it is a cross-section of New York.
Exactly, exactly. And that's specifically why Trump was there yesterday. Those are key demographics that he sees are starting to break for him just a little bit. That door is opening for Hispanic voters to start voting for Trump in record numbers. They want to capitalize on that in this election. They think if they do, it'll spell success for them.
That's Olivia Rinaldi. She's a reporter on CBS News yesterday, commenting on the rally that Trump had in the Bronx. Again, massively successful rally. They expected between 3,000 and 4,000 people, and got, from my estimate, about 20,000. Some are saying even more than that, and I believe it, because as I was leaving, there was at least 10,000 people trying to get in. And it's just remarkable to see the way people are mobilized for this movement known as Make America Great Again, or the America First movement. And I want to continue our discussion with regard to all the topics we've been discussing tonight. World War II, veterans, your plans for Memorial Day. And I want to go to Paul, Zanesville, Ohio, WHIZ. Paul, go right ahead.
Hey, good evening, Rich.
Hey.
Yeah, I would just like to say that I would like to thank all the veterans, of our military and the ones who are currently serving. I truly, truly mean that with my utmost sincerity. Thank you for what you do for our country. We wouldn't be who we are if it wasn't for them. Now, and I have something to say about this here thing with Trump. No, I think that a lot of this election will hinge on what happens Tuesday when they come back with this verdict of guilty or not guilty. And I just think that there's such a support behind Donald Trump right now. If they come back with a guilty verdict, that we know there's a double standard when it comes to law. There's this lawlessness in our government, And I just think that that wouldn't be a good thing. But I most would like to thank all of our veterans on this Memorial Day. I'm going to see my father up on the wall here in Greenwood Cemetery in Zanesville, Ohio. He was a veteran. He served on a destroyer and an ammunition ship. And I would just like to wish everybody out there a very happy Memorial Day. Remember the reason why we are who we are. It's because of our military, and the people that support them. So that's what I had to say, Rich. You're going to be gone for a while. And by the way, Don Giordano, he owes me a pizza. And I wanted to say one other thing.
Make sure you get to a New York pizza.
Now, I love it. Now, I got to ask one other question. Who's going to win this? I know you're a boxing fan. Who's going to win it, Tyson or Paul?
So let me tell you, I honestly don't know. I am so beside myself with trying to even figure out where I'm going. A good part of me says, look, Mike Tyson, like the song The Eye of the Tiger, he's it, right? He's got it. Mike Tyson, if you've ever heard some of his interviews, he talks about being a bullied little kid and how that hurt little kid inside of him comes out, and the rage is what takes over when he's in the ring. And, I mean, unless you are visually impaired, if you've ever seen Mike Tyson box, doesn't look like most boxers, right? He looks like he's destroying people, and he has a record of doing such. All that being said, the guy looks like he's in great shape. He's very fast, but he's 57 years old. He's been out of the ring for a very long time, and he's fighting somebody that's a lot younger. And if this guy, Paul, if he can survive, which there's a good possibility he can, dancing around, moving around, and outdo him on conditioning and on endurance. Imagine a 9th round. What does a 9th round look like between Logan Paul? Right? Is it Logan Paul or Jake Paul? I always forget.
Jake Paul.
Jake Paul, yeah. So Jake Paul and Tyson in the 9th round, Paul, just imagine what that looks like. I think Tyson is a heavyweight that's very winded, and you've got this younger guy who's probably been training, it's the fight of his career. So I honestly don't know, but my gut says Tyson's it, and I'm trying to score some tickets to that. I'd love to go to that and be ringside if I could. So if I do get to go, I'll give you the play-by-play when we come back. And if we get this verdict while I'm out of the studio this coming week, rest assured I will be doing a couple of live streams on my social media. So stay tuned on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and Truth Social for an update on that. And I can only imagine that they're going to come back with a guilty verdict and move forward with an appeal. And their hope is that, things get overturned on appeal. People don't care because then they start running the ads all summer and into the fall. Trump, who was found guilty by a New York court for blah, 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 for campaign finance violations. And Trump is this and Trump is that. And, I mean, they already have this incredibly dishonest ad that the Biden campaign is running against Trump with respect to just everything. I mean, from Charlottesville to they're still using those tired lines. So, obviously, if they're using it, somebody's believing it. But I believe less and less people believe it each day. And when you have, like yesterday, the rapper comes up and he says, Mr. President, some people will whisper your success, but shout your failures. But Trump is going to make sure we all win, or something to that effect. The first thing that Trump said to him, which was very funny, when the guy smiled at him, he has his teeth capped in gold with diamonds, the rapper. And Trump goes, that's pretty cool. I want to get one of those. I thought that was great. Now today, there are memes all over the social media with Trump with these gold grills in his mouth with golden diamonds. It was just so funny. And I think, Joe Biden could never pull that off. He could never relate to the youth, to the hip hop community, to rap culture the way Trump does, because Trump's always had a foot in or a leg in with this community. And it wasn't until the Democrats really ostracized him that they started to hate on him. But I think there's a lot of love for Trump all over again. And I wouldn't be surprised if he shows up at the Tyson fight, because Tyson's a big advocate of his, and they've been big supporters of each other over the years. So we'll see how that goes. Paul in Zanesville, I want to thank you for the call, and I also want to thank your dad for his service, and a big shout out to his memory as you go visit his name on the wall. Godspeed to you and your family this Memorial Day.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. You have a nice one too, Rich.
You bet, brother. You bet. All right, we're going to pause right here, coming right back. The rest of your calls and more straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. No hair, no care, and live on the air, it's Rich Valdez.
What are you here for? I'm here to watch the Trump gathering rally here.
What do you think about him being here?
I think it's great. I think it's dope. From my generation, from what I know, this is the first time president has actually came to the hood. I know presidents have came to the Bronx before, but we're talking about Woodlawn, Riverdale. He has came to Morrisania, South Bronx, the hood. So I respect that.
Listen, this guy wasn't kidding. That's a report there from Savannah Hernandez, a very intrepid documentarian. It was a rough part of town, definitely a rough part of town, and everything went off without a hitch. Honestly, it was. I was very impressed, and I've been to these things before, but I have to say that this particular rally, I expected to have a lot of crazy AOC, all out crazy types, and to the contrary, there was a handful of them, but everything went off. It really was, like Trump said, it was a love fest. Let's continue with your calls as we make our way through. Let us go to, where do we go here? We go to Gil, Manila, Philippines. Go right ahead, brother.
Okay, thank you. By the way, I am a veteran, and I didn't do anything really noteworthy during my service.
Thanks for your service either way, Gil.
Okay. First of all, about Governor Holcomb. The governorship of New York has very little moral authority after governors like Andrew Cuomo and Elliott Smith, who couldn't keep their pants on. There's not much moral authority in that office. Number two, a very, very significant find just happened here off the Philippines. They discovered the wreck underwater of the U.S. submarine Harder, H-A-R-D-R.
Yeah, we mentioned that a little while ago. Isn't that cool? I actually said, I wonder if Gil from Manila had anything to do with that find.
Well, I don't know, but I have a tie to that. My father was a boss in the electric boat shipyard during World War II, and that's the shipyard that produced the Harder. The commanding officer, Sam Healy, was awarded a Congressional Medal of Honor. Some years ago at the cemetery, he's listed there on the wall at our cemetery here in Manila, the largest World War II cemetery outside of the United States. 17,000 burials and another 35,000 men who are listed on a wall as missing in action. That's where Commander Healy is. And he is related to Healy, Sam Healy. He's related to the Healys of Healy Plaza, the owners of the Dallas Morning News.
Wow! So the newspaper owners connected with the ship, with everything. That's Interesting. Yeah, ultimately, I think you always have these like media executives types that are always linked into something at different points in history. Gil, thank you for the call, brother. I hope that you and your family have a blessed Memorial Day. Thanks for the call. Thanks for finding the USS Harding, by the way. Harder, rather. I'm kidding, but I do appreciate the call, brother. And let's go to Walter, St. Augustine, Florida, WFOY. Welcome.
Buenas noches, Rich.
Buenas noches, Walter.
Thank you. I once want to tell you about an island I was stationed on in the Aleutian Islands it was called Adak, A-D-A-K, Adak, Alaska. And I was there in 71, 72. I was a radio man. I can't elaborate, but I can tell you that while we were hiking on the, high tops and hilltops, you would see submarines passing, many times at periscope depth and so on. And there was an active volcano there 40 miles away. It was called Mount Sitkin. And it used to smoke. It was active. And I understand that it blew sometime when it blew up mostly hot smoke. Anyway, it was a top secret base, and I was in the security group of the base.
Wow. That's quite the story. And, it reminds me of something that happened earlier today. And I'll mention that in a moment. But it's always interesting to talk with people who've served, to see the different things that you guys endured. And it always makes me wonder, those who aren't around to tell the tale, right? To share of their stories of service. And some interviews over the years I've done for Memorial Day and Veterans Day. And some of the things I've heard, in particular from people that were in war zones, or from people, mainly people that served in World War II. And it's just graphic and eerie sometimes, but just always remarkable. It just really is remarkable to see the things that the men and women in the military go through, from, like you said, things you can't really talk about as a radio operator, or everything else that we've heard this evening. So I want to thank you for your service, number one, and of course wish you a very blessed Memorial Day, Walter. Thanks for the call. St. Augustine, Florida, WFOY. Big shout out to everybody in Florida. I love Florida, by the way. Florida is a beautiful, beautiful state. And something that happened to me earlier today that I wanted to mention was I was calling into one of our affiliates, the great WDAY, in Fargo, North Dakota. And I had to postpone the interview because as I was calling in, they were getting hit with multiple tornadoes. And it was, eye-opening for me. I've never been in a tornado. I don't think I've even seen a tornado outside of television. I'm a kid from Brooklyn that lives in Jersey now. So I really haven't, I've done a little traveling, but I've never seen a tornado. And I'm grateful that I haven't seen one. But I know they go through a lot. And these tornadoes last, sometimes just a couple of minutes, but they can cause some damage. So I just wanted to give a shout out to all of our friends and listeners on WDAY, Fargo, North Dakota. And we're going to continue with your calls. Let's see. Let's go to Wayne, Bonners Ferry, Idaho, KBFI. Wayne, go right ahead.
I have the greatest admiration, Rich, as I know you do, for our military, our former military, our law enforcement, and people from military who decide to double down and join that thin blue line, which is now more than less a tightrope that they have to walk. Yeah. And I have to tell you, if you think the police academy gives them enough tools to survive out there in our ganglands, pucker up, Buttercup, because that's not how that works. Our military, former military, when they leave the military, they often go into law enforcement to be the backstop to help these young people, to give them the tools that they need to survive out there. And I'm talking about places like Pacoima, California. When you get in a cruiser in Pacoima, California, and you're on full swivel now, and you're riding shotgun, you've got both hands on that 12 gauge with one in the pipe and 12 in the tube, waiting for what's going to go wrong here. Who's
right, and any turn you make, any move you make, it could be your last move. You know, every time you get in a cruiser or you put on that uniform, there's a target on you. And I did some time as a volunteer. I did 3 months in the police academy and did very simple things, court duty. If there was, a down power outage, something like that, a down power line, I did traffic duty, in a small town I lived in. And I can tell you, I didn't even come close to doing what the cops did, or like my brothers who were NYPD. But I can tell you that the first thing they told us was, doesn't matter whether you're a reserve cop or not, that they'll kill you just the same, just for putting on that blue shirt. And I've known that to be true from what I've heard and seen, and thankfully not from my own experience. But it's a task, and my hat always goes off to all of the men and women in law enforcement. Thank you for the call, Wayne. I really appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in and for your call. Have a blessed Memorial Day. Big shout out to everybody in Bonners Ferry, Idaho. KBFI in the building. Folks, I'm Rich Valdez. We're coming right back. Keep it locked.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
It's the speed round, so you got to be quick. Let's go to Galesburg, Illinois, WGIL, and check in with George Washington. Go right ahead, George.
I'm going to pass. I've been on hold for.
All right, let's go
minutes.
to Bob, Bowling Green, Kentucky, WKCT. Bob, go right ahead.
Hello. Got an alternative for the abortion kerfuffle we're into right now.
Quickly.
And it's real simple. Our current birth rate is below replacement levels. That's going to affect everybody on Social Security and a lot of things. We got a lot of people that are looking for babies or that can't have them, and it's costing them a lot of money.
To make adoption easier. That's right. You make abortion harder, you make adoption easier. I get it, and I think you got a solid point there, Bob. Big shout out to everybody on WKCT in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And folks, I want to thank you for an amazing week on the air. I will be off for a little bit. I wish everybody an amazing Memorial Day. Hasta la próxima. Take care. Good night, and God bless. I'm Rich Valdez.